throughout the 5 boroughs. You're not alone. You know how they make this statement, we're all in this together? Well, yeah, the people are, but not the politicians, that's for sure. So they can all accept a certain amount of blame for this. But in reality, you have to say, you can spend all your time blaming your elected officials, but what does it get you? It's not going to get you anywhere. I'm not suggesting that you don't continue to be a nudge. You don't continue to try to grease the wheel and get some relief because of the unfair way this was imposed upon you with none of the typical standards of the Department of Homeland Services. There's a certain litany of things that they have to go through. And remember, they just put 90 shelters in various neighborhoods throughout the city in all 5 boroughs. But they still had to go through the community board. They still had to deal with local officials. They still had to have open hearings. In this case, they had none of that. It came under the cover of darkness, and all of a sudden you were informed that hotels were being used as homeless shelters. And in fact, in the last 72 hours, I've been able to get a lot of information about how it is these makeshift, we'll call them pop-ups, because that's the vernacular day, like a pop-up store. A pop-up shelter was all of a sudden incorporated into your hotels here. Well, number one, if you look at the Department of Homeless Services' own rules and regulations, if you're a sexual offender, and there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, you ought to be housed on Ward's Island.
That's right.
Ward's Island is a huge facility. There's one for men, there's one for women, and there's one for those that are considered emotionally disturbed. They call them MICA facilities. There's plenty of room. They have a campus area, and that's where they've always been assigned. But under these executive powers that the governor has and mayors have all across the country because of the pandemic, they basically don't follow any of their own rules and regulations. So if all of a sudden you said, how did this happen? Tough noogies, I'm in charge, I have executive powers, unprecedented because of the pandemic, you cannot contradict that. Well, wait a second. There are certain rules and regulations that still have to be followed. Secondarily, when they defunded the police to the tune of $1 billion, they had a specialized unit that I've dealt with for years that goes into the shelters, that works with the private security who are hired, like at the Lucerne, it's Arrow, huge corporation. They also have Department of Homeless Service police. They don't have the powers of the NYPD, but they're able to actually physically engage the clients. The private security are not. So they would have police officers assigned to come in and deal with the security directors and the directors of the shelter to put up a comprehensive security plan for outside, within a 1 square block area, and inside. And if there were problems that required police response, 911, these specialized units, these are men and women who trained specifically for this, who had a lot of experience, would respond because they know how to deal with a wide range of issues. That was disbanded. You didn't hear anything about that. But in the rush to transfer $1 billion from the NYPD budget to social services, that program gone. So now when you notice, you call 911 when it's related to a homeless shelter issue in one of the nearby hotels, you get limited, if almost no response. And then if in fact the police or the 20th or the 24th precinct respond, they really don't seem to know what it is they're supposed to do. They haven't been given the training. They don't even know if they have access to go into the shelters. So it's what you would call Yiddish mishigash. It's out of control. It's crazy.
That's right.
And I hold the person responsible is the police commissioner, Dermot Shea, because he lives right in this neighborhood.
That's right.
He's right on West 73rd Street, Columbus, New Amsterdam. You say to yourself, gee, you live right in the neighborhood. Dermot, you think you ought to actually go out and get a cup of coffee, a little schmear on a bagel, look around and see the problems that have taken place with no provisions for public safety. Now remember, the single able-bodied men who were shipped overnight from Lower East Side shelters under the theory that coronavirus spreads into shelters because there is no separation. Bunks are usually 3 feet apart. I say to myself, gee, why wasn't that done at the beginning of the pandemic when New York City was the most infected, when we had the most deaths? But there's a reason. I'll give you a few of them. But the point is, these are men who have been designated to have serious drug and alcohol issues. Now think of it. Drug issues. Well, I've spent my life in New York City and there have been drug problems that men and women have had for years. And they might be sent to a residential facility called Phoenix House, Daytop Village, Samaritan Village, Odyssey House, and there are others. And I visited a lot of them, and they run pretty darn good programs. The men and women there, they're residents, they live inside the facility, they prepare their own food, they have to do their own maintenance, they learn how to get back, assimilate back into society, and hopefully lose their drug addiction. They do a much better job. Department of Homeless Services only does one thing: warehouse human beings. There is no therapy, there are no services, there is no outreach. And think of it, just from a monetary point of view, the cost. Let's look at the Belle Claire. A year ago, had a guardian angel come in, spend a week with the guardian angels here in New York, because he wanted to sort of upskill his levels. $79 a day. $79 a day at a time, before the pandemic, huge demand because we had so many tourists. We didn't have enough supply. So all of a sudden, you would figure they'd be jacking up the prices. $79, that was the bargain basement, no frills price. Now, it's $150 a room, where they had no clients coming in because of the pandemic. You say to yourself, now wait a second.
$300 because it's two.
Right, two, right. You say to yourself, how is it we the taxpayers get jacked up like that when in fact they weren't even able to rent out the rooms on a daily or a weekly basis because of coronavirus? Now you got to follow the money. And when it comes to DeBlasio, he loves to get wine dined and pocket lined by those who provide housing, let's call it differently, warehousing with no services for the homeless. So we know there are alternatives where these men could have been serviced for their drug addictions and their alcohol addictions. Now let's look at the more serious problem, the sexual offenders. In this neighborhood, I don't live far from you, if I go on the registry, I can see who it is that's a registered sex offender. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, they're different levels. Anybody living in this area, because they have to register. And if they don't register with a nearby police department and it's found out, they can be rearrested. How is it you take known sex offenders who should be housed in Ward's Island, that's why it's there, it's not near any schools, and under the cover of darkness, you put them in the hotels you have converted overnight to warehousing for homeless people, those who are emotionally disturbed, those who have drug addiction problems, those who have alcohol problems, and some who are sexual offenders, who have assaulted adults and have assaulted children. So now today I was outside the Belle Claire and I spoke with a security officer who works in there. I've known for years. He said, Curtis, on the hush hush, mush mush, I don't want to be seen with you, you're toxic. You know, I got bills to pay, I got child support, but let's meet at 72nd off of Broadway near the entrance to the 1 train, and I'll give you the scoop. Now the Department of Homeless Services says that whatever sex offenders were housed in the Lucerne or the Belle Claire have been transferred out.
Not true.
So the clients themselves, that means the men who are housed there, they know who the sex offenders are. Because remember, they all came from the same facilities, from the Lower East Side. It's not like they were all commingled, some from Queens, some from the Bronx, some from Brooklyn. So the fact is they know who the sex offenders are. The security officers know. And the Department of Homeless Services has a responsibility through transparency to let you know. But they know this violates their own rules. And in fact, now they act like, oh no, we transferred them. Okay, well, where did you transfer them to? None of your BIB business. Well, yes, it is our business, because if they're going to be residents of this community, people need to know if they are on the sexual assault registry, right? Everybody wants transparency. I want to know who the bad cops are. I want to know their background and records. But I also want to know if sex offenders are living in the neighborhood. Doesn't mean I'm going to stand outside with a pitchfork. Doesn't mean I'm going to violate them. But hey, we have a right to know, especially if you have children. And there's going to be the startup of school. We're not necessarily sure how that's going to go, but we certainly know there are plenty of schools in the area. So strike 3 on the Department of Homeless Services. So now what are you going to do in the interim as they do this mumbo-jumbo routine? Well, I'm sure some of you who have legal acumen are going to fight it in court. Good. You might knock yourself out because the courts are not really in session like they typically are. They video conference, but I would highly suggest that. I think per capita, per person up in this neck of the woods, got a lot of people who are lawyers. So filing lawsuits would certainly, possibly expedite the situation. When asked, how long will these men be housed in these hotels? Until the pandemic is over. The other day, when Cuomo was asked as governor, well, when do these executive powers cease to exist? When I say so. Now, you know, I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat, all these governors and mayors all over the country, they are drunk with power now.
That's right.
Because they don't have to go through the legislative process, they don't have to go through the judicial process, and they certainly don't have to come to community boards and explain themselves.
Nope.
In fact, they just go right over the top and impose this on people. So I would say, hey, number one, if you're going to go to court, certainly do that. Class action suits, that always seems to have more weight in court. You can figure out the nuances on that. Number 2, do not let Department of Homeless Services, Stephen Banks, pit you against the men who are housed here. See, that's what they want to do. They do this in every neighborhood. I've been in almost 90 of the neighborhoods that are very diverse, all throughout the 5 boroughs, that they have forced these shelters into. Washington Heights, South Bronx, overloaded. Going to Brooklyn, parts of Queens, overloaded. Some are predominantly black, Hispanic, some are poor and impoverished, some are middle class, some are wealthy. Doesn't matter. It's hit every neighborhood. But what they always say is, oh, you're prejudiced against these men, or these women, or these families who are down on their luck. Don't let them do that, because that's how they divide and conquer you.
And that's what they've been doing.
Your problem is everyone's problem in the city of New York, because they're not dealing with the real problem is warehousing homeless people and not providing services. They certainly know how to spend our money. Number 1, I've been out in the streets for 41 years. With the Guardian Angels, I've dealt with a lot of emotionally disturbed people. I've run across volunteers and other agencies from the city and state that deal with these men or women who are in very hapless situations, both in the subways and in the streets. I have never seen someone from Thrive, the $1.25 billion boondoggle that DeBlasio and his wife have set up to supposedly deal with mental health issues. You would think, with the imposition overnight of turning hotels into warehousing for homeless and turning these hotels into shelters, there would be an office of Thrive in each and every one of these hotels, right?
That's right.
To deal with these men's mental health needs, whether they need medication. As we would say in Bades, ma quanamai. It doesn't exist. They have yet to be able to explain how they have spent $1.25 billion.
Yep.
Now, the other thing, at the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdown in early March, social service organizations, whether they happen to be religious or they happen to be just normal secular groups or government, abandoned the homeless and the emotionally disturbed on the subways in Penn Station and the Port Authority. You know who filled the void? Who gave them masks? Who gave them water?
Guardian angel.
Washed their hands with alcohol, provided them food and nourishment, and found them a place where they could relieve themselves because they closed all the public bathrooms. It was the guardian angels because we said, fear not. They didn't care about them then. And to be honest with you, they really don't care about them now. It's a numbers game. And the ones who benefit from all this are the owners and operators of these hotels who had no clients. And it's politicians who are going to be the beneficiaries because they perpetually run for office, or they have political PACs, or they want to help their other friends when they're running for office. They will be the strong donor base. They won't forget because we are enriching them and they are providing nothing in return. So all of you need to figure out what is it that you can do for your community. And some of you have different skill levels. We're here today to provide the guardian angel answer. We're not the panacea. We certainly aren't just going to appear and all these social ills are going to suddenly disappear. But what we hope to do is put a container, a lid on it, keep the men from reacting emotionally, from going out there and publicly pleasurizing themselves and using your streets as a toilet and fighting with one another and setting up homeless encampments. Why would you need a homeless encampment when you have a room and 3 squares and a shower, a place to stay with air conditioning instead of the hot, sweltering, humid heat? So there is no excuse. You can't say for these men, you know, why are you living? Well, we know why they're living out in the streets, because curfew is 10 o'clock at night. And under curfew, if you're not in the pop-up shelters, you don't get a bed that night. You don't get the bed of your choice. The permanent. You'd be surprised. These men are very territorial. The only thing they really want is their own bed. It's like everybody else. You want your own little piece of something. So if you're telling them they don't get in by 10 o'clock at night, doors closed, and they're going to lose that bed, whether it's the closest, to whatever they need, that becomes a Damocles sword over their head. So you will see between the hours of 9:30 and 10, it's like a rush to get in before the doors are closed. They have to go through the metal detectors. They have to be wanded. Well, guess what? I could have 100 needles on me. It does not show up on a metal detector, does not show up on a wand. Along Broadway, I noticed there are a posse of drug dealers. Even this morning, 9 o'clock, I was out in the streets. Guys were slinging nickel and dime bags, not a reefer or ragweed or Maui Wowie or Hindu Kush, heroin. And they were selling it with needles. Then you had the pill guys, Oxys, Percocet, Vicodin, and the drug of most choice is K2, because you can get a little package for $1. $1 a joint. Just any of you who don't know what K2 is, they take leaves, usually in basements nearby in Paterson, New Jersey. They spray chemicals on it. They smoke it. It's such a toxic and noticeable chemical smell. And it really scrambles your brain. Remember how they used to have that drug PSA that if you smoke marijuana, your brain will end up like a fried egg. This stuff, your brain will end up like a fried egg. It really does debilitate men and women. It affects them neurologically. It brings out a rage, the likes of it I've rarely seen, from just a simple joint of K2. It is not marijuana. It is not hashish. It is nothing that you were used to that was available to you in the streets. And it's commercially made in some states like Georgia with premier packaging. And you say, I can't believe that. It's actually made in the United States. I thought they would do it only in laboratories illegally or bring it across the border. No, some states it's legal. So understand, this is the menace we're dealing with. So we hope to have a presence, 3 shifts a day, morning, afternoon, and night before curfew.
Can we also get a presence on the east side where crime has been ridiculous?
But don't think all of a sudden, we wave the magic wand and everything goes away. The police are not responding for whatever reason. I think I know,
We all think.
knowing of many guardian angels who went on to become police who have yet to retire. Their attitude is, hey, you want to defund us? You want to abolish us?
Exactly.
You want to flip us the bird?
Retaliation.
You say F the police, F12, all cops are bastards, ACAB, you see it all over the city. Okay,
And the cops are
now
right.
you may have to find out the hard
That's
way
right.
what it's like when no police respond. Now,
That's right.
that may be it. The other thing is, the police command is completely disconnected from the men and women in the streets. There is no respect for them. And then lastly, is Comrade DeBlasio, who is basically checked out. So he has no friends. Remember, originally he had no friends on the right, no moderates. Cops turned their back on him in the first term. But he always had friends that were more progressive, more liberal. Now even those feel that he has basically abandoned us like he did when he was Don Quixote, swinging at the windmills for 4 months, running for the Democratic nomination to become president when he couldn't even run the city of New York. So now he's totally checked out. So, that is our answer. You need to put the pressure on the officials who live in your neighborhood. There are 2 in particular. Dermot Shea, you all know where he lives, because some of the protesters went outside of his house just the other week from 2:30 to 3:30 in the morning, and they alerted everybody where Dermot Shea lives. We all now know he's a neighbor. Number 2, there's Scott Stringer, who I think was birthed here. He's been a politician from birth. He's been an Upper West Sider. He's always said, I'm proud to be an Upper West Sider. He's the controller of the city of New York. He wants to run in the Democratic primary to be mayor. But where has he been on this issue?
Nowhere.
These are his neighbors. These are his friends.
In his basement.
I don't want to be Karnak the Magnificent, but if I put the envelope to my head, I would say quite a few of you voted for Scott Stringer for controller. So you would think
No.
he would say, gee, I got to respond to my community. And remember, you don't have to be disrespectful. You don't have to be charging into their apartment buildings, ringing their bells, doxing them, or any of that nonsense. They have security details provided by who?
Us.
The NYPD armed. 3 shifts a day. 4 guys or gals that are assigned to them. And they're always outside their apartments. So you'll know when they're inside because there's security details outside. And then respectfully wait out there as if you were queuing up to see the Godfather and ask for a favor. And then when you see Dermot Shea finally come out, or Scott Stringer and say, guys, what have you done for us today? Have you walked the neighborhood? Did you go out and get a cup of coffee with a schmear on the bagel? Did you see what is happening to this neighborhood? Are you oblivious? Are you blind? Are you naive? Or do you just not want to deal with it? They can be pressured. Number 2, there's King Cuomo. The man who, remember, we have coffee with Cuomo every day at 12. He tells us all about his life, the meatballs and spaghetti he had with his family. Out of that, who wants to hear that morning, noon, and night? But he has said, hey, the emotionally disturbed persons roaming the streets are a problem. Well, guess what? When he came into office as governor, there were 30,000 beds in the state mental health facilities to provide these men and women with help, badly needed help and medication. 30,000 beds run by the state. Do you know how many beds there are now after his multiple cuts into the budget of mental health? 3,000.
Oh my
3,000. You say to yourself, how can that be? This is a city of 8 million people. Just if you look at the percentages, the number of men and women, especially in a pandemic, the depression, all these other issues kick in, bipolar, psychotic issues. I deal with these people all the time. All they need is a little help, a little compassion. How can you say that you're for the poor, the downtrodden, the impoverished, if you're not even going to take care of the destitute who are passed out all along the medians of Broadway, who are just so hopelessly addicted to drugs that they can't even function. They've lost control of their mental and physical faculties. Well, guess what? We're not going to abandon them. We're going to make sure that they don't violate you, but we're going to make sure as guardian angels that they get the badly needed help that they get, even if we have to stand there for a month of Sundays to get the EMTs there to make sure we can resuscitate them, get them to a hospital, and hopefully come up with a remedy for them.
We love you.
So, it's, again, not a panacea. There are three things you can do. A, if you want to get involved and join us, because that always helps, the more local participation, the better. Some of the young men and women who have joined me today from the Guardian Angels, they came up from the group that we organized in Chinatown, Little Italy, and Soho after the lockdown because they've had an enormous number of problems. You remember the looting that went on there nonstop. I got my jaw broken. Another Guardian Angel got his not only eye socket broken, his nose broken, he had 46 stitches, and we were the only ones in there because the cops were told to stand down by the leaders that be. But that community has decided no more. We're organizing, we're patrolling our communities. That's what we intend to do here on the Upper West Side. But you have brothers and sisters in solidarity. Below you, Hell's Kitchen, out of control. Chelsea, out of control. Washington Heights, Inwood, out of control. Other parts of the city, out of control. I wish we could be in all places for all people and get them all engaged, but we can't. So to those of you who organize and want to go out there and lawfully, without weapons, with no special powers or privileges, in an interracial group of men and women who want to go out there and protect all those who live in this community, feel free to join the Guardian Angels. If you're from the area, you can see Danielle when the meeting finishes. For those of you who need more information, we're not discussing politics now. I just lambasted every politician imaginable.
We need you.
It's almost like you don't want to be called a politician. I feel like you're so soiled you want to take a shower after mentioning their name. But if you need more information about the Guardian Angels, you go to guardianangels.org. You all have cards that can put you in direct contact with us. If you'd like to help us in all we do, we're in 13 countries, 130 cities now. After operating for 41 years, you can certainly go to our PayPal and help us that way. But you now at least have a panoply of different remedies to help. And lastly, when we're going around checking up on the single able-bodied men, we'll make sure that they have masks, because they're not being given masks at the shelters. We'll make sure that they're getting water so that they're not dehydrating out there and passing out in the streets, because especially if they have drug or alcohol problems, that is usually what happens. You can check them, as I always do. A lot of them have medical tags around their wrists that indicate where they've been recently hospitalized, whether it was a medical facility or a psychiatric facility or a healthcare facility. Oftentimes it indicates what meds they should be on. We've oftentimes at Penn Station and that area near 34th Street brought people to make sure they get their meds so that they can function normally. So it's all encompassing. And we're hoping that you'll get involved. We're hoping that you'll continue to support the effort. And we hope to be able to give you some relief. So I'll take any questions that you might have now.
Curtis for mayor.
Thank you. How does it sound?
Hey guys, thanks for watching Comedy Matters TV. To check out some of our other videos, click on the boxes on either side of me. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Not just for me, but for my parents.